It's the Texas weather discussion video for Monday, the 20th of May. I'm Donovan Neal. Of course, we're looking at a very significant tornado outbreak, a classic Southern Plains tornado outbreak to take place in the Southern Plains later today. And for North Texas, we'll experience a few showers with maybe an isolated supercell in place today and maybe tomorrow. But the rest of this week looks mostly dry with upper 80s likely. So what about the tornado outbreak today up in northwestern Oklahoma? Will this affect northwestern Texas, and to what extent will this affect the Southern Plains? Hopefully we'll be able to answer all of your questions here. But first, like we always do in these videos, let's start with the upper air map. This is the upper air analysis at 500 millibars. You can see we have that upper trough. That's basically in the western side of the country. That's basically going to move more to the southeast. That'll provide sufficient dynamic support for abundance of supercells today. Temperatures early this morning. Now, when it's in the low to mid 70s, you can already tell something's going to happen today. But since we're so warm this early in the morning and we're so moist, I'm not surprised. I won't be surprised if we see some fog in some places. This morning, and around the nation, the places where we can see the most severe weather, they're already in the 60s. They're already in the low to mid 60s, where they're usually in the 50s and 40s in some places, and that's obviously not a good situation. Take a look across the watch warning map. We already have a very active map going on. Flash flood watches for for pretty much all of Oklahoma and much of Kansas and some of the adjacent states. Freeze watches and warnings in effect for parts of the high plains near the Dakotas and Minnesota. And down here we have wind advisories in effect for all of north central Texas and much of west and central Texas. And close to the severe weather zone, we have a severe thunderstorm watch that's in effect until 10 a.m. this morning. And then again, that's to mainly suffice for that morning batch of strong to severe thunderstorms that will basically intensify and move to the east over time. Okay, let's talk about our severe weather risk. And guys, there you have it. How about a high risk of severe storms for parts of central and western Oklahoma, parts of the eastern Texas panhandle, and parts of northwestern Texas. This is the first high risk we've seen, and this is the first high risk we've seen in 2 years, which means these are very, very rare. You only see these once a year at best. So this is a very, very substantial threat with potential for a very significant tornado outbreak. And these are the tornado probabilities. And within that high risk, that 30% hatched area means that there's pretty much a 30% chance of seeing a strong tornado within 25 miles of any given point within that zone, which is very, very significant. Again, we only see these threats maybe 1 or 2 times a year at best. That just basically describes the rarity of these situations. But we'll talk more about that here in a second. Tomorrow, that threat shifts to Missouri and parts of Arkansas and parts of Illinois and parts of the Midwest and parts of North Texas as well. We are in the marginal risk. And on day 3, some of the same zones that's basically being threatened with severe weather is basically threatened with a marginal risk on Wednesday, but we'll talk about that here in a second. But one thing that we do want to get clear is the flooding threat for much of the Southern Plains today. And amounts here in North Texas, of course, a half inch to an inch of rain, but amounts in Oklahoma around anywhere from 2 to 7 to 8 inches of rainfall expected for parts of central and northern Oklahoma. And that's mostly anything that we see just the beginning half of this week. And of course, if the high risk for severe weather wasn't enough, they're in a high risk of excessive rainfall for parts of central Oklahoma, including the Oklahoma City metro area, if the tornado outbreak wasn't enough. So let's go ahead and discuss logistics. This is the GFS. This is the 06Z run. valid this afternoon at 1 o'clock local time. This is the upper air look at 500 millibars, around 18 to 20,000 feet off the ground. The trough turns more southerly, which will allow more than sufficient dynamic support for severe storms. And you can see we have that surface low that's basically positioned near the Colorado. New Mexico border. That's 996 millibars. Now, of course, on the synoptic scale, this is more than sufficient for severe weather. But let's go to our timing here. This is the HRRR, the High Resolution Rapid Refresh Model, at 11 o'clock this morning, and you can see of course they'll deal with a morning batch of showers and thunderstorms. Now the tornado potential is very low with this batch. With main threat will come from hail, some small hail, and some strong straight line winds. But the main activity doesn't come until now. This is 1 o'clock. You can see we have some supercells already starting to develop out in the high risk zone. Cluster thunderstorms already starting to turn into supercells. Very volatile atmosphere. Now this is 4 o'clock today and this afternoon, and this does not look good at all. I mean, we already have very isolated supercells developing or already in progress for the Texas Panhandle and parts of West Texas, and even in the most prone area in western Oklahoma and central Oklahoma, and basically right on top of the Oklahoma City metro area. And of course, we all know bad things come out of those storms when they're on top of the OKC metro. And this is 7 o'clock. Storms, you can see supercells are pretty much still ongoing at that point, and it really doesn't end. It really persists through the overnight hours. This is 9 o'clock. The threat for strong tornadoes and hail and wind, all of that basically persists into the overnight hours. With that, you can see a cluster of severe thunderstorms out in the Panhandle in West Texas near the Red River, and also parts of northern Oklahoma. That basically persists into the overnight hours, and that's where we get that flooding threat. Okay, since we have the timing down, let's talk about the threats. This is the instability values. This is a surface-based CAPE, and you can see the numbers are just off the charts today. We have areas around 6,000 joules per kilogram, over 6,000 joules per kilogram. And of course, that's basically a powder keg. That's a loaded gun scenario for the Wichita Falls area and parts of northwestern Texas and western Oklahoma. Like I said, these numbers are just off the chart. Typically, we have instability values like this in July, in August, maybe even July. But that just describes the magnitude of the severity of this threat today. And let's take a look at the helicity index, 0 to 1,000 meters above the ground. And you can see these are very, very robust values across the high-risk zone, especially central Oklahoma. And of course, that's very indicative for for a tornado outbreak in place. But the one thing that really stands out to me is the STP, the significant tornado parameter. And these numbers, like I said, are just off the chart. Now, just to put things in perspective, anything above a 1, you can see a tornado. Anything above 2 is significant, but when we get into the 5s and 10 range, I mean, man, we're talking about tornado outbreak right now, and this is what we're looking at right now. STP values are around 24 in central Oklahoma, 16 around the Oklahoma City metro, and 10 in a high-risk zone. Wow. I mean, I'm at a loss for words. These are the highest numbers I've seen in my in my 9 years of doing this. These are one of the highest numbers I've seen in quite some time. And of course, that's very indicative for violent long track tornadoes across central and western Oklahoma. And this is the updraft helicity index. You can basically see the northeastern component of motion that the supercells take. And of course, they're concentrated in a high-risk zone in western and central Oklahoma, and also parts of northwestern Texas and the Panhandle as well. But let's take a look at its sounding. Now, this is the sounding I took. Just outside of the Wichita Falls metro area. Wichita Falls isn't even in the high risk. It isn't even in the high risk, and we're already seeing Cape values over 6,000 joules per kilogram. Wind shear is basically wind shear, the directional change of the wind with altitude, basically around 50 in the 50s at this point. Very strong directional wind shear, and the LCLs are very if LCRs are very indicative of violent long track tornadoes, and the STP, the significant tornado parameter, is peaking out over a 10, and of course that is just off the charts. That's just very significant. And the photographs, the one that you see on the top right, that's just off. That's just turning the wind with altitude. That's just that's just a loaded gun scenario, with violent long track tornadoes likely. So we'll give you this map again, and again we'll show you this map again, and again the main threat for severe thunderstorms for the high risk zone mostly comes from 12 a.m. today, this afternoon, to 12 a.m. at night. We're just going ahead and give you that 12-hour window period. Any supercell that develops in that high risk zone will have the potential to rotate and be very quickly and produce tornadoes, and not just any type of tornadoes. We're talking about very large and potentially violent tornadoes this afternoon and evening. And that's not the only threat. Very large. The flooding threat is the second best thing out of this entire threat and out of this entire event. And obviously that's very significant. But also hail and damaging winds will be very possible with this. I mean, look. This is spring. We deal with these threats. We deal with the threat of severe weather all the time here. So this should be no stranger to us. But for the past few years, it's just we've been so quiet for the past few years that we're just not used to this, and it's just like any other threat. This is just like any other threat of severe weather. You have to treat it as such. You have to make sure that you have your severe weather safety plan in place. Make sure you have your severe weather safety plan in place. Make sure you have a way of getting warnings. A good app is Weather Radio by WDT. Every home should have a NOAA weather radio. And when severe weather threatens your location, you need to be in a storm shelter on the lowest floor near the center of your house, away from windows. In your storm shelter, make sure you have food, water, air horns, helmets, hard-soled shoes, good clothing for you and your loved ones and your family. And you'll just ride this thing out very quickly. Very good. And there's always potential that nothing will happen, and this is one of these cases where we're just hoping and praying that this is the case. This is the one of several times that this high risk will bust. But today is looking like a very active day, with a tornado outbreak on the horizon for the southern plains. So just be ready for it, please. Alright, so let's talk about Tuesday. Tuesday for north central Texas. Focusing on north central Texas, we pretty much mention the chance of a potential line of severe thunderstorms on Tuesday morning. Highs will be in the low 80s. And then Wednesday, we pretty much clear town. Highs in the upper 80s at this point. Same thing on Thursday, and same thing on Friday. And here's Saturday of next week, pretty much the same deal. We pretty much stay dry. Highs in the upper 80s, and same thing on Sunday. And here's a week from today, Monday the 27th of May, troughing pretty much in that same zone. And down here, we pretty much stay dry. Highs in the upper 80s. And here's a week from Memorial's Day. Here's the end of the 10-day forecast period. This is Wednesday the 29th of May. Troughing, we pretty much have a ridge starting to build, and we pretty much stay dry. But you can see for the numbers for the next few days coming off the European ensemble, for the end of the forecast period, you can see we pretty much stay in the upper 80s for the rest of the 10 days for the next 10 days, and I think we won't see 90-degree weather until June. That's it for the Texas weather discussion video for today on OneNotes and the blog. Next video here will be coming at around 7 a.m. tomorrow morning. If you can, catch local TV stations on the air this afternoon at 4, 5, 6, and 10 o'clock. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. Be safe out there today, and Godspeed.